This Solar Warlock build destroys Grandmaster Nightfalls. This build combines 2 exotics and 4 seasonal artifact mods that completely shine in harder content. I wanted to grind out GMs to get more golf balls, aka Ascendant Shards, and I needed a reliable build to get the job done. This build does exactly that, so let's jump straight into it. The first thing you need is the Warlock exotic Dawn Chorus. To summarize what this exotic does, it improves your Scorch damage and gives you melee energy when you apply Scorch to a target. Now that plays into our second exotic for this build, which is Polaris Lance. With Polaris Lance, landing 4 precision hits, return ammo to the magazine, and hits a target with a delayed solar explosion. So that means you have an infinite chain of solar explosions by scorching enemies with your Polaris Lance. What really surprised me is that, especially when you're doing DPS against a boss, you can just chain landing those precision hits and you'll have infinite ammo and you'll be able to infinitely scorch all your targets. In my opinion, Polaris Lance is one of the strongest weapons to take into difficult content when you combine it with a solar subclass. Now the next thing we want to cover are the 4 seasonal artifact mods that make this build shine. Number 1 on the list is Kindling Trigger. Kindling Trigger means that Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched targets. So since we are using a solo weapon Polaris Lance, once we become Radiant, it's going to scorch all those targets that aren't scorched before. Next on the list we have Flint Striker. Rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon final blows grant us Radiant. So when you're combining Flint Striker with Kindling Trigger, if you're not Radiant before, you will become Radiant by just landing precision hits on all your targets. We will be combining that with the 3rd seasonal artifact mod, which will be Revitalizing Blast. Now Revitalizing Blast gives us the chance to have a debuff in our build while on Solar. So even if you're going inside of a solo content or you're doing a dungeon with friends, you're able to weaken bosses, champions, and mini bosses by just throwing a solar grenade or even by using your solar melee, and that will debuff or weaken those bosses. So you have a debuff in your kit as well. And finally we have the last seasonal artifact we want, which is Rays of Precision. While Radiant, all our solar precision final blows cause combatants to ignite. So not only are we scorching our targets because of Kindling Trigger, but once we kill those targets with solar precision final blows, we will make those targets ignite, and once they ignite, they're going to spread Scorch stacks to all the surrounding targets. So if you haven't got an idea what this build is about, we're going to be causing rapid explosions. We're going to be causing rapid explosions no matter what we jump into, whether that be dungeons, raids, or even the season activity, the coil. Once we defeat enemies, once we're Radiant, we will cause those enemies to ignite and they're going to spread the Scorch stacks to all the surrounding combatants. If you combine those 4 seasonal artifact mods with the 2 exotics, Dawn Chorus and Polaris Lance, then you already have a strong build ready enough for difficult content. You can easily conquer any content by using those 2 exotics and combining these 4 seasonal artifact mods. As for our subclass, we're not going to be using anything special on our Solar Warlock. Everything in our subclass will just enhance this build, and you can always swap around these fragments and aspects. But the fragments and aspects we're using will be Touch of Flame. We're using Touch of Flame so that our fusion grenade can explode twice. It's giving our fusion grenade that enhanced functionality, which is exploding twice instead of exploding just once. And we are rocking Well of Radiance instead of Dawnblade, just because Well of Radiance, in my opinion, is just better than Dawnblade, especially for team content. The next aspect we do have is Icarus Dash, and you can always swap out Icarus Dash if you're not using it, but Icarus Dash is just going to make us so we can dodge quickly and get out of that enemy line of fire whenever necessary. And as for our fragments, we just want to enhance our Scorch damage as much as possible. So the number 1 fragment you will need in this build will be Ember of Ashes, so you apply more Scorch stacks to your targets. Once you combine this with Dawn Chorus and Polaris Lance, you're scorching every single target, and once you do scorch those targets, you're going to make them ignite. So Ember of Ashes just makes sure you're able to ignite enemies even quicker. The next 3 fragments we do have will be Ember of Eruption, so we have an increased area of effect with all of our solar ignitions. The next thing we do have is Ember of Char, so once we do make those solar ignitions, we're able to spread our Scorch stacks to all the afflicted target. And it grants us an extra 10 discipline. The last mod we do have is Ember of Wonder, so we can start generating orbs of power by rapidly defeating multiple targets with solar ignition. Since we're scorching everything and making everything ignite, Ember of Wonder really shines in this build, and we get an extra 10 resilience to this build. As far as the stats you want to build into in this build, we're shooting for 100 resilience, so we get a nice 30% damage reduction, and then we're building into 100 discipline. We're building into 100 discipline so we can refund our solar grenade, aka our fusion grenade, so we're able to make targets ignite quicker, especially unstoppable champions. If you want to stun unstoppable champions in this build and you're not rocking a weapon for it, if you make unstoppable champions ignite, then you're able to stun them. So in this build, you won't even need to rock any unstoppable mods, because with your Polaris Lance and scorching the unstoppable champion and making it ignite, you're able to stun it. And once you do become radiant in this build by using your seasonal artifact mods, you're able to take care of barrier champions as well. So you're taking care of not one but two champions in this build just by combining your seasonal artifact mods with the Polaris Lance. But the key stats we're looking for will be resilience and discipline. If you are able to get double 100s on both of those stats, then the next stat you want to build into is your recovery, as your recovery is tied to your rift cooldown. And that wraps it up for the build. If you guys want to know the exact mods I'm using, there will be a dim link in the description, so feel free to check the description for the dim link to just enhance your build to the next level by seeing the mods I'm using. But if you guys made it this far in the video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.